For more on that subject, we're joined by Meir Javedanfar, the Iran lecturer at the Interdisciplinary Center. Herzliya, good to have you with us as always. Now, the administration's issued a few, ways for us to determine where they're thinking on this. They sound a bit cautious on Iran, yet Israeli concerns have been put forward so front and center. Has it been a little too much too soon already?
Actually, David, this is good so far. Don't jinx it. It was far worse during Obama. Things got really bad very quickly with Obama. So far, it seems that, touch wood, it's only his first day, Joe Biden. Let's give him some time. But so far, it seems that Netanyahu has not done as much. Of course, we have our concerns, very valid concerns. But to be honest with you, regardless of Israel's position, I think then what really comes down to is that the future of the JCPOA and the future of America's approach towards the Iran nuclear deal will be decided as part of the negotiations between America and its European partners. America, it seems, and I emphasize seems, wants to go back to the JCPOA as is, but it seems that some European countries who are members of the P5+1, such as Germany especially, want new things to be included, such as Iran's missile program.
What do we know about Russia and China? Also, signatories here, just as critical to the deal as any. Do we have any idea where they stand on re-engaging or what their priorities might be?
To be honest with you, from what they haven't said, clearly, they haven't heard anything that says they want anything different than return to the JCPOA. It serves their interests for sanctions to be lifted against Iran because the Chinese especially know that Iran, with more oil income, will become an even bigger customer for their products. And for Russia, it's very important because they also want to have Iran back as a customer. But at the end, it's not entirely up to them, to be honest with you. No. If America decides to renegotiate the JCPOA, especially, there's not that much that the Russians and the Chinese can do to veto it, because it's actually America who has a veto on Iran, especially because of America's tremendous economic power, which has stopped many countries doing business with Iran.
Now, on this other side, should we be concerned that the Iranians, in particular, they seem jubilant upon Biden's election here? Is it just wishful thinking on their part, or what are your thoughts on how things will move forward?
Well, Mr. Rouhani is optimistic. Because Trump really, what's the polite word, undermined him. Over the JCPOA, Mr. Rouhani invested a hell of a lot of effort and his political capital to have JCPOA, to have it approved. I'm sure what was even more difficult for Rouhani was negotiations with the hardliners, with the regime, which is hardliners, than his negotiations with John Kerry. And then Trump came and just, walked out. So he has reason to be optimistic, but to be honest with you, as far as the people of Iran are concerned, there are so many issues in Iran that, I think the people of Iran hold the regime and the government responsible for many of their failures, more than the American government, which is interesting. I'm not saying people welcome sanctions in Iran, but people, I think, from my understanding, are really hold, first of all, the regime and then the government responsible for the economic misery which has fallen upon them. And surprisingly, we hear reports in Iran that actually some people are sad that Trump is gone, because they saw him as the only U.S. president who's really willing to pressure the ruling regime.
Well, by design, that's a tough public sentiment to gauge here, the Iranian public. Looking at Iranian behavior, though, 20% uranium enrichment here, a push towards a weapon at this point, or are they just positioning ahead of any potential negotiations with the U.S.?
I think they're hedging their bets. I think mostly this is towards negotiations with the U.S. Look, do you remember the famous diagram by Netanyahu at the UN where he drew a bomb and he drew a red line? And that red line was, I think, about 900 kilograms of 20% uranium enriched, between 900 to 1,000 kilograms. Iran is not anywhere near it. But look, they want to push, again, we have to look at it from their point of view. They feel that they were wrong. They were abiding by the deal, a deal which they had signed, which they reached the Americans. So then not only the Americans walk out of it, and they impose sanctions against them, and now they want to change it, some people. So the Iranian regime, just like any other negotiating partner, wants to go in there with a stronger hand. And whether this will serve them, we have to wait and see. But, this is their way of boosting the position.
Now, there's a different reality now around the region. How's the Abraham Accords, these normalizations now between Israel and Gulf states, how has that changed the equation now for the Biden administration, but also for Iran in terms of how this may get negotiated, or what role might be played by these Gulf countries?
Look, at the end of the day, I think the only impact that this will have is if Israel and the countries that signed the Abraham Accord present a united diplomatic and, more importantly, a united military front against the Iranians, which I don't think is going to happen. So, the Abraham Accords, of course, are a setback to the Iranian regime because Israel, instead of being BDS, is being welcomed in the international community. I have a good feeling that there are numerous people in Iran, a notable number of people are also looking at this and saying, what if the Arabs are reaching deals with Israel, then why not us? But of course, this doesn't move the regime. But overall, I would say the Abraham Accords are more of they have a side and a more isolated impact on the way the Iranian regime views the nuclear program and its dealings with the U.S. over.
Well, certainly it's the issue in focus in Israel here right now. Meir Javedanfar, thanks for breaking it down for us.